Muted. The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Hi everyone. Thank you for tuning in today. Before we begin, I just wanted to let you know that booth space agreements will be available online soon. If you haven't heard, we have a new online dashboard you'll be able to use to reserve your space, purchase promotions, make payments, etc. all online. And you'll receive an email when that all goes live with more information and how to log on. So with that being said, let's get started with today's webinar entitled Get the Most from Pre, During, Post Trade Show Exhibiting. The webinar will be conducted by Richard Urshick from TradeShowLeadsToSales.com, and we'll let Richard introduce himself. So take it away, Richard.
All right. Thank you, Kim. Hi, everybody, and thanks for tuning in to this exhibitor webinar entitled Get the Most from Pre, During, and Post Trade Show Exhibiting. It's going to be all-inclusive. The Pittcon show isn't until the beginning of next year, but it's certainly not too soon to start doing some of the things that you're going to learn here today. As Kim mentioned, my name is Richard Urshick. My company name is TradeShowLeadsToSales.com. I'll tell you a little bit about myself in a few minutes. But before we begin, Kim, can you turn the controls back over to me?
I think they are on you, Richard.
We have a technical problem. My slides won't advance. They just did a second ago. Are the attendees muted?
No.
Huh.
Oh, yes, they are.
Okay. All right, as I mentioned, my name is Richard Urshick from Trade Show Leads to Sales. This is going to be a different kind of webinar than you may be used to, because unlike all other webinar presenters that tell you what you should be doing before, during, and after a show and why, I'm going to actually show you how to do things like a proven way to respond to your leads that will assure 100% lead follow-up, and how to get a positive return on investment from exhibiting. I know that may sound too good to be true. Well, stay tuned, pay attention, and take a lot of notes. If you don't have a pen and something to write with, please grab one, because you're going to want to take some notes. And if you have any questions or need any help with what you learn here today, you also have 30 days of free telephone support. So you can call me for anything you need at the number I'm going to show you in just a minute, whenever you need me. Okay, you ready? If you haven't done your math, there's going to be 30 exhibiting hours in the Pittcon show. So you can plug your own numbers into here, but if you're investing $20,000 in this show to exhibit, you're going to be spending about $666 an hour to be there. That's about $11 a minute, and if you generate 50 sales leads, they're going to cost you about $400 a lead. So follow-up and measuring your return on investment is going to be critical, and I'm going to show you exactly how to do that. We're going to talk about things you can do before the show, at the show, and after the show to be totally effective at this exhibiting process. The number you see on the screen, I'd like you to write that down. And if you have any questions throughout this webinar, rather than typing them into the chat box on the bottom of your screen, just text them to that number, and I'll address them all at the end of the webinar. Or if they're appropriate during the webinar, I'll stop and address them then. So if you have any questions, write that number down, and then keep that number. It's good for 30 days if you have any questions after this webinar. As for an agenda, the first 25% of this webinar is going to be devoted to a little bit of an introduction about me and the trade show industry, and some information on increasing the number of visitors to your booth. Secondarily, about 25% of the time will be devoted to some booth visitor complaints, so you don't make the same mistake a lot of exhibitors do. Then I'm going to show you some do's and don'ts of booth staff behavior. Lastly, and most near and dear to my heart, we're going to spend about 35% of our time on the subject of sales lead response and follow-up, and then we'll have some time for some questions and answers. Okay, who's in the audience? I'm going to assume there's people in the audience with sales in their title, marketing in their title, marketing managers, marketing communications people. Some of you may have sales and marketing responsibility. You may own your companies. You may be the president, CEO, CFO. Some of you may be new to exhibiting, and there might be some pros out there, but I'm sure everybody is looking for some ideas, some answers to some questions, solution to problems, and ways to increase sales, and that's what we're going to talk about. And since it's during the lunch hour, Kim is standing by and Marion with water balloons in case we need to heave them into the audience to keep you on task here, but let's see how this goes. Why do companies exhibit? Why are you spending the money to go to the Pittcon show next year? Most exhibitors exhibit in trade shows to generate sales leads, but there's a lot of other reasons to exhibit. You may be going there to meet buying teams or to train your salespeople. You might be going there to close some existing sales that you may have started earlier in the year. You might be going there to build relationships, but primarily most exhibitors exhibit in trade shows to generate sales leads. And in that regard, trade shows are a means to an end. They're a means to get you to the sale. Now, image and brand awareness is important, but let's focus on sales as the main reason you're going to the show. Trade shows today are being measured by upper management in companies, your management I'm sure, based on the results of the show, not the activity. By that I mean very seldom is your CEO or president or your boss going to come up to you in 3 weeks and say, I really appreciated the padding you put under the carpet. They're going to be interested in results. What did we sell? How much did we make? And those are the profit dollars that are going to pay for this show. But I know these are profound statements to make so early in this webinar, and you're probably asking, who is this guy and what's this company Trade Show Leads to Sales all about? In my previous life, I was a vice president of sales and marketing and an exhibit manager in a major U.S. industry. Primarily, the company I worked for manufactured machinery and all the tooling and parts that went along with it. I personally have exhibited in over 150 international trade shows, and I had the same problems all of you do. I have also had the unique experience of sitting around on crates and carpet rolls for hours waiting for labor to come in and set up my booth. So I've been there. I've walked in your shoes. I've felt your pain. In 1986, I solved the sales lead follow-up problem with what I'm going to show you at the end of this webinar. And I founded a national service organization. American Airlines actually named one of the most innovative companies in the country and a best practice in trade show marketing for the reasons you're going to see in a few minutes. What you're going to see today is actually based on having processed more than 1 million sales leads for over 140 business-to-business companies. You're going to see some unprecedented statistics. We made over 1,600,000 outbound telephone calls. We transmitted 127,000 faxes and emails, and we actually shipped over 350 tons of client literature. During all of that, we identified billions of dollars worth of selling opportunities for customers and companies just like yours. So what you're going to see is all real-world, fact-based information like none other you've seen in a webinar. Now, I'm not selling anything here. There's no sales pitch. There's no sales message. I'm not selling anything. I'm just going to tell you some secrets behind the success of my own personal exhibiting experience, which carried itself into this very successful national service organization. I've conducted more than 350 seminars, webinars, and workshops all over the world teaching exhibitors what I'm going to show you. I've worked with a lot of in-house companies. I've gone into their companies and conducted workshops for their salespeople and their booth staff to get them all on the same page before the trade show. And I work with a lot of trade show organizers like Pittcon, teaching exhibitors like you how to assure that the leads get followed up after the show. Now, my seminars and webinars have been critiqued as being very useful, fast-paced, applicable, eye-opening. Some of them call them the best on the program. So I'm going to start with a question and see how quick you are. Pay attention to the screen, if you will. There's going to be an acronym in just a minute. And when I do this in person with a room full of 50 people, I ask them to shout out the answer. If you want to shout out the answer, that's fine. But what does this mean? Okay, normally people would shout out, oh my God, that's correct. Okay, one more. How's this one? Make sure everybody's awake. What does this one mean? Right. It means laughing out loud, lots of luck, laughing online. All right, one more. Paying attention? Watch the screen. Quick. What does this mean? But who really said that? No. Yeah, it might mean that, but what it really means is, what's the formula for exhibiting successfully at the Pittcon conference and trade show? That's what we're going to be focused on here today. And I promise that this is probably the busiest slide you're going to see in this whole presentation, but I want to dwell on it for just a minute, and I'd like you to look at those numbers and pay attention to the cost of a lead generated at a trade show versus the cost of a sales lead generated in the field. Now, salespeople and sales managers, I'm sure you find that very interesting. From the standpoint of opportunity at Pittcon for the past 10 years, over 80% of the visitors that are going to be coming into your booth have buying power. The average visitor spends over 9 hours at a 2 to 3 day show. Over 85% of the visitors that come into your booth will be new prospects. Now that's a tremendous opportunity for exhibiting in this trade show. So you need to exhibit and follow up on those leads successfully to get a positive ROI, and that's what I'm going to show you how to do. This is staggering, and I put these in to remind exhibitors that you're participating in a $93 billion industry. Trade shows today are ranked 22nd in contribution to gross national product. Did you know they're larger than all of agriculture and printing combined? The trade show industry is huge. There's about 13,000 trade shows per year in North America alone, and that's over 1,000 a month, 250 a week, or as we are in this webinar today, there's 35 trade shows going on right now. Unbelievably, there's no formal college education offered to teach trade show exhibiting. Nobody teaches you this. It's basically an increasingly expensive trial and error process. Most companies, they exhibit by accident, not on purpose. Most of them go because they went last year and they feel they'd be conspicuous by their absence for not going again. But all of that is changing. Everything in this trade show industry is changing. And why is it changing? Because the CFO, the Chief Financial Officer inside of companies today, is starting to ask the question, what did we get out of that show? Show me some return on investment if you want to maintain those big trade show budgets. And that's what I'm going to show you how to do here. This is the reason we're all in this webinar today. If you look at the media, the industry trade publications related to sales and marketing, they're all focusing on ROI. What are we getting out of these expensive trade shows? The cost of these shows is going up. How do companies measure return on investment? It's very important if you want to maintain budgets today. All right. That's enough of the introduction. Let's talk about ways of increasing the number of visitors that are going to come to your booth during Pittcon. Pittcon, I'm told, has a publisher partner program, and it's not too soon to start working with these publishers. You can run ads in these trade publications with your booth numbers on them. You can send them press releases, new product announcements with your booth numbers on them and have them give you some publicity before the show. Because if you think about it, all of these publications have a circulation, and that circulation is basically another name for the readers of their publications. Those readers are potentially booth visitors to your booth, and consequently, if you can get more visitors, you're going to get more leads. Pittcon, like few other show organizers that I've worked for, are giving you a lot of free information and free opportunities. In fact, just for attending this webinar, they told me that you're going to get an enhanced listing on their mobile app when it's ready for the show. You're going to get highlighted in their exhibitor list. You get a custom logo, embedded videos, handouts, product highlights. About $1,000 worth of free stuff just for sitting in on this webinar. Contact Kim. There's her email address at Pittcon for more information about these freebies that you're going to get. And take advantage of these because they're all designed to help you be successful at Pittcon. The fact that you've got so much time between now and the trade show, your best source of names for trade show invitation are in the names you already have. Look into your customer lists and your prospect lists and your proposals that you may have sent to people. And if you sell a product that has a warranty, a service warranty, you've got another database there. Use that database to invite people to the Pittcon show. And don't forget to put your booth number on everything. And be sure that on whatever you use for pre-show promotion, you do three things. You provide your prospect or your potential visitor to your booth with information about what you're going to be exhibiting, an invitation to bring them to your booth and a reason why, and qualification of their needs. Now, I've been in this trade show industry for over 3 decades, and I've seen a lot of exhibitor direct mail pieces. But there is one that stood out that I saw about 3 years ago. And if you'd like a copy of a direct mail piece, you can have this absolutely free. Just copy it or clone it. It's the best pre-show promotion direct mail piece I have ever seen. I'd be happy to send it to you. Just text me your email address and I'll be happy to respond with this right after the webinar. But this is something, again, it's free. You can clone it and own it. I've actually talked to the people that have designed this and they said, sure, we're proud of it. Give it away. They're in the veterinarian industry, but naturally you'll want to change the words and the graphics. But the way it's laid out and its content is unbelievable, and I think you'd like to have it. So it's yours free. Okay, Kim, Marion, I got the water balloons ready? Hopefully we don't need them. All right, let's talk about what to do during the show. I'm going to show you some actual booth visitor complaints and some do's and don'ts of booth staff behavior while you're working the trade show. And by the way, these are not my complaints that I've compiled, but there's an organization called SEER. If you have not heard of this organization, write down this URL to their website. This company is everything trade shows. If you want to know anything about trade shows, this company has it. I would strongly suggest you join this organization. It's the Center for Exhibition Industry Research. Everything I'm going to show you comes from them. It's compiled from information that they've provided. It's amazing. This is what booth visitors say. 87% of the leads captured at a trade show are never followed up. Never followed up. 76% of exhibitor salespeople. Now, salespeople listening, I'm not picking on you, and by the end of this webinar, I promise you're going to love me. 76% of exhibitor salespeople view the value of trade show leads no better than cold calls. How can that be? I'm going to show you exactly why. And again, salespeople, you're going to love me. Here's another complaint that visitors have. Over 40% of visitors are dissatisfied with how the exhibitor's booth staff met their needs both during and after the show. They complain that there's too many low-level staffers. If you've got a sophisticated or complicated product that you're going to be exhibiting, you should have technical people there that could answer any possible question about that equipment. Don't expect to do it after the show because you're going to lose them. You only get one chance to make a first impression, and you should be there with your technical people to answer any questions that come out. They say there's over-aggressive booth staff, and I'm sure you've seen the people, I've seen a lot of them, where you walk down the aisle and they run out of their booth with literature and they stuff it in your bag or under your arm. People don't like that, or you stick those little Velcro or self-adhesive buttons and things on people. They don't like that. Overhyped giveaways is another situation. I'm going to show you in a little while how to do some pre-show promotion where you can actually promise people something in exchange for visiting your booth. Now, when I was in the industry, now remember, I told you we sold very expensive, very sophisticated equipment. My direct mail program used to include cross pen and pencil sets. They were gold, and at the time they were $97 for a set. I used to send a direct mail piece out to people and say, if you bring this direct mail piece into the booth, we'll give you a $97 cross pen and pencil set. Now, by overhyped, I mean if you did something similar and when they show up you give them a Bic pen, they remember that. So give them whatever you promised them. And again, $97 for a prospect in our booth was pennies because a piece of our equipment sold for $500,000 or $1 million. So everything is proportional, but you might want to design a direct mail piece and promise them something for coming to the booth. Okay, let's talk about some do's and don'ts of booth staff behavior. Here are some things that your booth staff should do and things they shouldn't do. The first thing they shouldn't do is eat while they're working in the booth. Now, I'm not saying don't eat for all the time you've got booth duty, but if you're going to eat, don't eat in the booth. Go outside and eat. Stay at the restaurant. Stay at the counter wherever you got your sandwich or food or whatever you brought. Just don't bring it into the booth. It's rude and distracting, and most importantly, remember your breath because you're going to be talking a foot away from these people. Load up on Tic Tacs. They're wonderful. Here's an example of what I mean. Look at this booth staff person standing there with a Starbucks cup of coffee and a bagel eating while his cohort is explaining this piece of equipment to this customer with his hands in his pockets. I mean, look, does that booth staff person look interested at all? That looks terrible. Another booth staff don't talk on your cell phone when you're working the booth. Everybody's got to make phone calls. Everybody has to get phone calls. If you get a call and you have to take it, walk out of the booth and take it. It's also rude and disrespectful, and visitors won't want to interrupt you if you're on the phone. Here's what I mean. Look at this. This booth staff person is so distracted by that telephone call, he doesn't even see that prospect in the front of the booth handling, actually looking at, manipulating the products. I mean, look how that looks. Here's another booth staff don't overstaff your booth with unnecessary people. Now, in your industry, you probably use the trade show as a perk for bringing in all of your distributors, dealers, manufacturers, reps, salespeople, people from the office. That's all well and good to let them look at the show, but don't let them stand around or crowd your booth. The rule of thumb is one staff person for every 50 square feet. So if you've got a 10 by 10 booth, 2 staffers, that's it. And I certainly don't recommend chairs in the booth. And conversely, don't understaff your booth either. Don't leave it empty and expect people to just pick up brochures or grab a drink of water and try to understand what you're doing in that booth. Another booth staff don't, try not to talk to each other. Try not to huddle around talking to each other with chit-chat. Again, visitors won't want to interrupt you. Here's what I mean. Look at this. These booth staff people are talking to each other and they're sitting down on chairs. People won't want to go in and interrupt them. And just look at how terrible that looks. When at the end of my career in the trade show industry, I took the chairs out of the booth and I shortened the amount of time the booth staff has to spend in the booth so they're not as tired or looking for a place to sit down. It's better not to even have the chairs in the booth, but that's just a suggestion. Don't block the entryway of your booth. Give visitors room to get in. If you've got a table in your booth, don't put it right in front like this company did, because it doesn't leave enough room for people to get in, and the graphics on the back wall in this booth are so small that a prospect in the aisle can't look over that table to read those graphics. So leave room in the booth. If you have to have a table like this in a 10 by 10 booth, put it on the side along the pipe and drape. Don't put it directly in front. And again, look at that booth staff person sitting there in that chair. Who would want to go in and interrupt him? Most importantly, out of all of these do's and don'ts, whatever you do, don't ever ask the prospect that comes in the booth, can I help you? Those are the worst 4 words you can bring to that trade show with you. Why? Because the prospect can simply say no. It's a closed-ended question. Can I help you? No. And now that prospect has that negative in their mind that you have to try and overcome or turn them around. So instead of asking those deadly questions, practice some open-ended questions that invite dialogue to get the prospect talking. If you ask them, "Hi, what brings you in?" they can't say yes or no. If you'd ask them a question like, "What kind of lab equipment are you using now?" they have to talk to you. They have to tell you. Get them talking. That's what you want. "Tell me about your laboratory equipment." Ask open-ended questions that get people into your booth and talking, and listen very carefully to what they say. Be sure to smile a lot, because people buy from those that they know, like, and trust. They don't buy your equipment all the time. They don't buy your company. They buy you. So, as I said before, you only get one chance to make a first impression. Make it a good one. Smile. Be nice to people. They'll remember it. Don't be afraid to make eye contact. You never know who you're talking to. I could tell you a story about Caterpillar tractor that would take an hour to tell all the details, but in a nutshell or cliff note, Caterpillar tractor, 20 minutes before the end of the ConExpo show, a guy walked in with coveralls on and he asked a couple of questions, and he ended up buying a factory full of equipment. So you never know who you're talking to. Qualify them as best you can, talk to them, get them talking, capture relevant information, and then follow up on them the way I'm going to show you in just a couple of minutes. Capture relevant contact information about everybody you're talking to, because I'm just going to assume, and I might be making a mistake, that a lot of the people in this webinar today, or on this webinar today, are not the people who do the actual lead follow-up. There's an intermediary step, or you're turning these leads over to a sales force. So capture as much relevant information as you can about those prospects when they're in your booth, because you got to turn that information over to your salespeople later. Create as much of a relationship as you can on the show floor. And if you are the person that's going to be following up on the leads afterwards, tell the prospect to look forward to seeing you. You're going to be the person. And the best way to qualify leads in the booth is to ask for a follow-up date on which you can come in and talk to them after the trade show. When they commit to a date, that's the best way to qualify people. It's hard to misrepresent that date, and we'll talk about misrepresentation in a few minutes. But get them to arrange a follow-up date. Get them to commit to a date. Tell them you'd like to come in next Friday and talk to them about the blue widget you just talked to them about. Get them to commit. Now, salespeople, we all know how much we like to talk, but remember, you've got 2 ears and only 1 mouth, so everybody in that booth should be listening twice as much as they're talking. Get people talking. Get them into a dialogue. Get them talking and capture relevant information. Okay, I'm sure some of you are getting it. Some of you still may be a little bit lost, but it's going to be a lot better, because this is absolutely the best part of this presentation. I hope you have a pen with you and something to write on. You're going to need it, because we're going to talk about after the trade show. I'm going to show you a sales lead response process that has proven to be effective. It's going to be contrary to what you've ever seen before, but it has to do with increasing the degree of follow-up attention that's placed on the sales leads. If 86% of the leads aren't being followed up today, and you get 100% of them followed up, just think of what's going to come out of that action. When I do this presentation in person, and I've got 50 people in front of me like I do today in this webinar, I usually ask the question of everybody in the audience, what's the biggest problem you have, you individually, personally, relating to your sales lead management process or program after the trade show? What isn't working? What's the biggest problem? Give that some thought for just about 5 seconds. Because in person, I would normally ask people, raise your hand if you wrote down anything relative to lead follow-up, or you have a hard time measuring the return on investment at the show. I tell people at this point to leave their hands up and look around the room, because 95% of the hands are up all the time. So everybody has this problem. It's not unique. When I was in the industry, before I started my business, I thought my company was the only one that wasn't following up on leads. It's everywhere. Everybody is losing the opportunity that exists in the leads that aren't being followed up today. So if you can get them all followed up, it's magical. And what's the formula? How do we improve lead follow-up after Pittcon? That's what we're going to talk about. Number one objective of going to a show, lead generation. What's their biggest problem? Follow-up. That's a paradox that people should start working on. Reed Business Information also said in their research 70% of trade show leads go uncontacted, while almost half of them buy what they inquired about within 13 months. The leads that aren't being followed up today, almost half of those people buy what they inquired about within 13 months. Just think of the selling opportunities that are falling through the cracks of that inefficiency. Most companies' lead management processes, and I used to be as guilty of what I'm about to criticize because I used to do exactly this. You generate leads, but by advertising, trade shows, the internet, however you generate them. What most companies do is they send literature to the inquirers, and then they distribute the leads to the sales force for follow-up. Then what happens to the leads? Remember, 76% of exhibitor salespeople view the value of trade show leads no better than cold calls. Something's not working. And what usually happens is marketing blames the sales department after the show, says you didn't follow up the leads, how can I generate ROI? And the sales force says your leads are junk. Nobody wins. Well, you're going to win after this webinar today, I promise you. Why doesn't sales follow up the leads? Any salespeople in the audience, pay attention because you're going to want to copy down these statistics and show everybody that asks you from now on. Exhibitors, exhibit managers, anybody who's ever worked a trade show, do you recognize this type of booth visitor? Where they just come in with the bag and they're looking for all the freebies, and they will tell the booth staff anything they want to hear. This person is going to buy everything. They're going to buy it in 3 months. They're the person who makes the buying decision when all they really want is the tape measure you're giving away, or what we used to call the fuzzy monkeys. The worst thing you can do, booth staff people, marketing people, the worst thing you can do is give that person's lead to your sales force. Think about it. The sales force is going to try to follow up the leads. They're going to find this person, and they're going to develop a negative perception as to the value of all of the leads. And guess what's going to happen? The leads don't get followed up. 76% of salespeople view the value of show leads no better than cold calls for this reason. Look at these statistics. These aren't mine. Read Business Information Systems relative to sales calls. The cost of a sales call by industry. Yours is probably not listed exactly, but find something close in the right-hand column. The average cost of a sales call today is $329. Look at this one. The average number of sales calls necessary to close a sale. Again, if your industry isn't listed exactly, the average is over 5 sales calls to close a sale. Look at this one in today's busy times. The average number of sellers seen in a week by buyers is not even 2. Salespeople, are you starting to like me now? These are the reasons it's impossible for you to follow up sales leads. The cost of a sales call, the number of calls to close a sale, the number of sellers seen in a week by buyers. If you generate 50 raw sales leads, your company's got to spend over $16,000 in follow-up costs. Your salespeople has got to make 256 sales calls to close the orders in 28 weeks to get in to see the prospects. Do you really think they're going to do that? It's all of these reasons why salespeople today are forced to call on their existing customers and ignore their prospects. And why are you going to exhibit in Pittcon next year? To generate the names of more prospects. Something's wrong, and you can fix it, and I'm going to show you how. Let's look at the sales funnel for the salespeople in the room. Everybody knows what the sales funnel is. Marketing generates leads, trade shows, the internet, print ads, and they go into that sales funnel. Again, marketing departments typically use a lot of this CRM, customer relationship management programs, big ones like Siebel or Oracle, or the small contact management programs like Sales Logics or Goldmine or ACT. And what do they do with those leads after they've gone through that process? They're distributed to the sales department, either based on territory, zip code, product line, whatever. But they're given to the sales force. And then what happens? Here's that 76% again. All that companies are really doing are getting the leads to their sales force faster so they can do nothing with them sooner. Now I'll give you a minute to write that one down because you use that in a sales meeting, it gets a lot of attention. What companies are doing are getting their leads to their sales force faster to do nothing with them sooner. The computer technology today doesn't work to get leads followed up. It works to get the leads to the sales force. Less than 20% of leads are getting followed up. 80% of the selling opportunities are falling through the cracks of inefficiencies of managing sales leads. Wow! We're going to fix that problem today. Because I ask you, why would you spend another penny of money or a minute of time generating more of the problem when all of the opportunity is in the solution? Solve the lead follow-up problem and you've solved all of the problems. Sales lead follow-up is not easy for the reasons we talked about. Because again, think of it. Your salespeople, they don't know these inquirers. Remember the statistics, 86% of those leads are going to be new business opportunities. Different people, they don't know them. They first have to establish a relationship. Salespeople, I'm sure you know, because I know, it takes a lot of effort to establish a relationship with somebody you don't know yet. And salespeople are saying, how do I make contact with these people? How do I even contact them? What do I do? Telephone them, fax them, send them an email? How do I get their attention? How do I get in to introduce myself? It's very frustrating today making that contact. And let me show you some statistics in that regard. If you try to telephone people after the trade show today, now I'm going to show you some statistics you've never seen before, but I'll bet you can relate to them. It's hard to make a telephone call to anybody today because of automated switchboards and voicemail systems in companies today. In fact, it takes 3.4 telephone dialing attempts to reach anybody for anything today. Can you relate to that? Let me prove the point. Right after this webinar presentation in my last slide, I'm going to give you my phone number. Try and call me. You won't get me. You'll get my voicemail. I'll try to call you back. I'll probably get your voicemail. We may or may not connect on the third call. 3.4 telephone dialing attempts to reach anybody for anything. Unbelievably, it takes 7.6 telephone dialing attempts to reach and identify a prospect that has an immediate or near future intention to purchase the product or service they inquired about. 7.6 telephone dialing attempts. You generate 100 sales leads, your sales department has to make 760 telephone calls to try and reach those people. Do you really think they're going to do that? Not a chance. Okay, you might think, well, let's send everybody a fax. These are old statistics and faxes are still used, believe it or not, but you can't send a fax to anybody today without written permission. I'm not going to go into the details of that, but that's per the Junk Fax Act, the Can-Spam Act. You just can't see. There's a $500 fine. If you send somebody a fax that hasn't asked to receive that fax, $500. So forget fax. Okay, I'm sure that a lot of you are planning on generating a list of emails, and right after the show, you're going to send an email to everybody that came in your booth. Remember the statistics if you didn't write them down. 86% of these people don't know you. And I'm going to ask everybody on this webinar today, what's the first thing you did this morning when you turned on your cell phone or booted up your computer? What'd you do with your email? You deleted most of it. Why? Because you didn't recognize anything in the subject line or you didn't recognize the sender. So what'd you do? Delete it. If the 86% of the people that you're going to send emails to after the trade show don't know you, what are they going to do with your email? I won't answer that. It's going to get deleted. Based on over 1 million sales leads, I can tell you statistically that only about 6 to 11% of all the leads you're going to generate at Pittcon are worthy of an immediate, now let me underline immediate follow-up attention. I'm not saying the other 89% are junk leads, not at all. but only average 10% are worthy of your sales follow-up attention immediately after the show. How do you find them? That's what I'm going to show you how to do. And I know most of the people listening have a lot on their plate. You got a lot of things to do, and the Pittcon show leads are just one of the things you're going to have to get to. But I'm going to ask you to do, and I'm going to show you how to do here. Do it yourself. You're the one sitting in on this webinar. You're going to see how to do it. It's best if you do it first, and when it works, you'll be hiring somebody to do this for you. And marketing people, according to the American Marketing Association today, marketing departments have to work closer with the sales force to help them with what I'm going to show you here. This should really be done in the marketing department before they're given to the trade shows. I'm sorry, before they're given to the salespeople, because it's the salespeople that are going to benefit from these leads. Before I show you how to do this, let me just mention what I call the prospect contact pendulum. Remember we talked about the barriers to contacting or following up on leads after the show? You can't really call them on a telephone unless you've got a whole staff of people because of the barriers, the automated switchboards and the personal answering machines. That's going to prohibit telephone calls. You can't do it by fax because you need written permission, and you're certainly not going to do that. And you really can't do it by email because of the reasons I mentioned and fear of viruses and all those things. So if you can't use the phone to follow up the leads after the show, you can't fax them, you can't email, how are you supposed to follow up on the leads? Direct mail. And I'm going to take a little sip of water while everybody in the audience says, this guy must be nuts. Well, I'm talking about direct mail. And Marion is my testimony, because I wouldn't be doing this webinar today if it wasn't for direct mail. Right, Marion? Are you shaking your head? Remember the story you told me about going to the trash bin? I haven't forgotten. No, I'm not talking about traditional direct mail that gets thrown away before it even gets opened. The post office says 71% of traditional direct mail that looks like promotional material gets thrown away before it even gets opened. I'm talking about lead response direct mail that gets opened. There's a big difference. How do you get it opened, and what do you do? That's what the next few slides are going to show you. I know some of you are using customer relationship management programs. I know some of you are using contact management programs like ACT and Goldmine, and they may or may not be working. I'm going to guess they really don't work to get the leads followed up, but even if you are using them, I'm going to ask you to do what I'm going to show you here in addition to that. And again, just try this, because what I'm about to show you in the next few slides, I turned into a $10 million service business by doing this for other companies, other exhibitors. Now again, I'm not selling the service. This is all in my past. I sold the company in 2009. I don't do it anymore. But this is what we used to do, and it generated $10 million in my company. But I'm going to ask everybody on this webinar today to take a piece of your letterhead, and on that letterhead, the headline will be customer satisfaction, not lead follow-up, customer satisfaction. Pick about 5 or 6 questions that you can ask, and I would work with your sales department and ask them, what questions would you like to have the answers to before I give you this lead to follow up? And let them buy into the process by giving you those questions. And put those questions on this questionnaire and make it simple so people can check boxes, circle a number, or fill in a little bit of information. In fact, that's an example on the screen right now of an actual customer satisfaction document. And again, if you took down that, or I'll give it to you again, that number, that phone number, text me your email address, and I'll actually send you a copy of one of these that, again, you can clone and own and just make it suitable for your company. But let's not get off track. Take a piece of your letterhead and turn it into a questionnaire. Now, very important, the first line should say, instead of bothering you by telephone or cluttering your fax or email, we're simply following up on your request for more information during the Pittcon show. You're going to remind them. And here, again, is an actual example of one of these letters that went out to a prospect, and that person returned this letter and said, thank you for not bothering me. And that person also, do you want to be contacted? No. Is there anything else we can do for you? No. Now, wouldn't you like to find that out on a returned customer satisfaction document instead of giving that to your sales force? On your customer satisfaction document, you'll notice down in the bottom, you can either have people fax it back to you after they complete it, or give them an email address, tell them to scan it and return it to you. But the process works like this. You design this on your letterhead. You use, I'm not going to get into the details of how you do this, but you do a mail merge, and from your database you generate a personalized letter. I'm sure most people in the audience know how to do that. And you send this document to all of your leads after the show. And I suggest you do it before you give the leads to your sales force. If the sales force squawks and they say they have to have the leads after the show, give them to them. But send this document anyway. Send it to everybody that comes to your booth. Now, how do you send it? This is the magic. Don't fold it. Don't tri-fold it and put it in a number 10 envelope, because that's the direct mail that gets thrown away. That's in the 71% of the direct mail that the post office says gets thrown out before it gets opened. So don't do that. Instead, go to the post office or Office Max or Office Depot and get these 6x9 envelopes and fold your customer satisfaction document in half and put it in that 6x9 envelope. That's a good way to deliver it. A better way is if you sell expensive equipment and you don't mind investing in an actual letter box, that's an 8.5 by 11 box that letter can go in, and send it in response to all of your leads. Or the best way to do it, roll that letter up and put it in a mailing tube and send it to everybody that came into your booth. Now I'm going to ask everybody in the audience, what would you do if tomorrow you saw that 6x9 envelope or that letter box or that tube in your inbox? What would you do with it? You'd open it. That's all you want the prospects to do. Open it. They'll see your customer satisfaction document, not lead follow-up, customer satisfaction. They all want to participate in satisfaction, and just be ready for what they say. But that is absolutely the best way to respond to your leads. Now, admittedly, most of the people you send this to won't even respond because there's no immediate contact required. So don't expect a huge percentage of those to come back. I can tell you you'll get about 3 or 4% back immediately. But those 3 or 4% are the ones that should go to your sales force immediately, because of what you've done is prioritized and made follow-up easy for your sales force. And then for those that didn't return that document, nurture those leads by doing exactly the same thing in about 30 days or 15 days or 2 months. You determine the frequency, but do this exact same thing. And because the timing of purchase changes, you'll get a number of responses back again. So you get the concept? Don't just give all your leads to your sales force and expect them to follow up, because they won't, because they can't, and because they shouldn't. Do this first, and you will be amazed at what happens. And I'll guarantee you, there will be 5 people in this audience today that are going to be sending me an email or a letter in about 3 months saying, oh my God, Rich, I can't believe this happened. Now remember, ladies and gentlemen, I turned it into a $10 million business. You can certainly use it to justify and generate an ROI from the Pittcon show. Okay, you got it? There's that phone number again. Send me your email address and I'll respond with a free copy of the best direct mail piece for pre-show invitation I've ever seen, or I'll send you copies of this customer satisfaction document that you can simply copy and do this exact same thing with, because it's magical. And the fact that Pittcon isn't until early next year is great, and it works in your favor because you can start doing this tomorrow. You don't have to wait for the Pittcon leads, because I guarantee you've got a database or a file drawer full of leads from last year's show, or your print advertising programs that haven't been followed up either. You can do this tomorrow on the leads you already have. It'll work on any lead. 3-dimensional direct mail is back, and it works. Here are a couple of examples of actual customer satisfaction documents that came back from prospects. Look at this one. Thank you for not bothering me. Did you receive the literature? Yes. Would you like to be contacted? No. Again, don't bother the sales force with this non-prospect, but look at this one. Not necessary at this time, but thanks for your responsible marketing methods. The rest should learn. This is a prospect that complimented this customer for using this process. Look at this one, salespeople. Did you receive the literature we sent you? No. Have you been contacted? No. Would you like to be? Yes. When? Today. Now remember, with this process, ladies and gentlemen, they returned this document to you either by fax or by email, which is instantaneous. They just completed it. If you can turn this around and get it in the hands of your salespeople within 10 minutes, all of this is fresh on the prospect's mind. Get the concept? Look at this one. Did you receive the literature? Yes. Have you been contacted? No. Would you like to be? Yes. When? This prospect, in their questions, or this exhibitor in their questions asked, would you like to be contacted in 30, 60, or 90? This prospect scratched it out. Can you see it on that form? And it said sooner. Now, salespeople, wouldn't you like to have this lead in your hands instead of that woman's lead pulling that shopping bag through the show? All right. One of our customers, back when I was doing this in the service business, was 3M. One of my friends there was Dennis Mick. He was the marketing manager, just like a lot of the people in the audience here in this webinar. He said, I can use these statistics because this actually happened. These are real numbers. This happened after a trade show that 3M exhibited in, and I want everybody to understand and see this for its value. 3M generated 474 leads at a trade show. They used the process I just showed you to respond to those 474 leads. 223 of the 474 returned that customer satisfaction document. And why is that number so high? Because 3M, in the tube, put a flash drive with a video on it. So these prospects were almost pre-sold by a video before they returned the customer satisfaction document. Of the documents that came back, 58 of them have already been contacted by a salesperson, which is great. But 165 of the 223 were not contacted yet. And of the 160 who weren't contacted, 10% of them said, I want to be. 16 people said, have your salesperson come in. I just looked at this video. It's great. I got to talk to you about this. Okay, are you with me? 474 raw leads. 5 orders resulted from those 474 leads. 5 orders. 3M invested $55,000 on that trade show to generate $625,000 worth of sales from those 5 orders. That's a 10-to-1 trade show return on investment. That's my vanity license plate on my car, and I have to explain that to everybody who asks. But basically, this is trade show ROI. And there isn't anyone in the audience here today, if you're still with me, that can't do this. And in fact, you have to do it. Get over the idea that somebody else has to fix this lead follow-up problem, because everybody in this audience today can do this, and change is up to you. Make the change that makes the difference in your trade show program and justify your budget. Generate a return on investment, and management's going to look elsewhere to cut budgets. Now, if there's anybody saying, oh my God, I wish my boss was here to have heard this today. This is so great. I want to do this. I want to start tomorrow. This webinar is going to be repeated again, I think, in January. You can get the date from Kim or Marion, but there's also a CD available. And as I said, this thing normally sells for $100, but I'll make it available to anybody that wants it for $49. It goes over everything we just talked about, but again, I'm not selling anything. If you really want all of these refreshers, remember, you got 30 days to contact me after this webinar. I'll be happy to answer any questions or help you through this process, or you could buy this CD. All right, that's basically the end of this webinar presentation, and I thank you for listening. Before we turn this back over to Kim, there's my email address if you need it. Take it down. There's the phone number again. and I want to get to some questions. There have been some questions that have come in that I haven't ignored. I've been watching them through the process. And let me get to this is one that comes up all the time. How many questions can be asked in the customer satisfaction letter? Okay, I'm going to say no more than 6. Don't burden them with answering questions, because what this process is really designed to do is to generate a dialogue, not to answer every possible question. It's designed to get your salesperson across the desk from them, so no more than 6. Here's another question. Where can I buy the tubes you showed? Well, there's a company in Chicago called Chicago Tube, T-U-B-E. You can Google them, or there's a company called Uline. They also sell them. Another question, how much does it cost to mail that letter in a tube? Well, when we were doing it way back in the day, it was about $2.45. That included the postage, the letter, the tube, and everything. And $2.45 you might say is a lot of money, but remember, if you're going to invest $20,000 in Pittcon, each lead's going to cost you $400. What's another $2 to make sure they all get qualified? Here's another one. Should the sales department do this or the marketing department? Well, my simple answer is yes. Doesn't matter who does it, just so somebody does it. Here's another one. Our company uses a CRM. Will this work along with the CRM? Yes, I suggest you do this anyway, and before the leads go into your CRM, put them through this process and only put the good ones into your CRM. Next question, how long after the show should we wait to do this? I'm going to suggest about 5 days. Let all the prospects go back and throw away all their junk mail before you do this. And here's the one that, this one I'm going to answer visually, because I don't show these next couple of slides unless somebody asks, but here's the best question of all of them. They said, we already do the lead qualification in the booth. Why would we have to do this? All right, for those of you that are still with me, watch the screen. Here's the answer to that question. If you think you're qualifying the leads in the booth, look at this. Don't stop with in-booth lead qualification. Here's why. We had a company that generated 474 leads, and based on the lead capture and qualification criteria in the booth, about 281 of them were determined to be good leads or worthy to be followed up. After the show, those 474 leads turned into 403 because some people just disappear. You can't even find them or reach them. Based on the qualification questions that were asked, 193 were determined to be worthy of follow-up. Incredibly, when we compared the post-show qualification with the in-booth qualification, only 11% of those people remained the same, which simply says that booth visitors, I'm not going to say lie, but they misrepresent the information they tell you in the booth, like the woman you saw on the slide that was dragging away the bag full of tchotchkes. They tell you anything. Don't stop with in-booth qualification. Use this process I just showed you on every one of your sales leads and watch what happens. Get these leads to your sales force right after the show. Don't expect them to call those 474 people, because if you give them to the sales force, remember the 7.6 telephone dialing attempts? They'd have to make 3,600 phone calls. Again, use this direct mail program, and I guarantee I'm going to hear from at least 5 of you after this trade show. All right, again, thank you very much for listening. I'll respond to all of these texts and emails when I get off the webinar. And Kim, you wanted to take it back at this point, I think?
Yes, thank you, Richard. Great presentation. We hope you all found this beneficial. And if you wouldn't mind, there should be a brief survey that'll pop up at the end of the webinar. If you wouldn't mind taking 15 to 30 seconds to complete it, let us know if you liked it and what other topics you'd like to see us present. And thank you again for attending.
Thank you, everybody.